Hey, so this is a quick video to help people who might think they are interested in reading J.R.R. Tolkien. There are millions of people who have never read those books. Maybe that's surprising to people like me, but there are. And they may have been exposed to the Peter Jackson films and been pretty grossed out by that. So, I want to assure you that this is still worth reading. I mean, this is what happens to, the Lord of the Rings when you are somebody who gets into fantasy science fiction from a young age. So, I hope you enjoy this video. Thanks. I'd like to take you back to a different time. The year was 1975. I was an American teenager, dropped off at the mall while my mom went shopping, and the used bookstore was just like a Shangri-La to me. And I could see in my mind all these mass market trade paperback fantasy and science fiction books up on the shelves. That was, at least from my point of view, the golden age of science fiction and fantasy. It's when I read all the science fiction fantasy classics like Isaac Asimov's Foundation trilogy, E. Smith's Lensman series, and it's when I first read Lord of the Rings. And yes, I started with The Hobbit. So let's just jump in and talk about the books and what I think you should read and why. Tolkien wrote The Hobbit starting early in the 1930s, and it was published in 1937. It was a critical and also a financial success for him. In fact, The Hobbit has never even been out of print in all that time. So The Hobbit is frankly a children's book in the sense that its target audience was supposed to be young people. I myself have never been too concerned about the difference between children's books and any other kind of books. As far as I'm concerned, The Hobbit is perfectly fit for an adult to read. So no issue there if you were concerned about it. I don't think Tolkien saw what he was doing as being for children either, but I don't have any proof of that. It's true that the story has some aspects to it which are kind of ludicrous or silly, and Tolkien is not going to be everyone's cup of tea. First of all, it's a very English cup of tea. It has a lot of class and race concepts built into it, kind of romantic ideas about love and honor and so on. But you probably won't be bothered by those things too much because those attributes do work to tell the story and they are integral to the story. So my proposal is, if you have no experience at all with Tolkien's books, is to start with The Hobbit. It's short, it's to the point, it touches on this much larger imaginary world that has a lot of interesting things in it. And generally, it's good fun. It's a pretty good read. Now, I can see an objection, which is that you may have had some unfortunate exposure to the Peter Jackson movies, derived loosely from The Hobbit. Just do your best to ignore all that. In this case, less is more. If you've come this far, or at least you're still interested in what I'm talking about, then it's time for us to tackle The Lord of the Rings. It's a trilogy, and Tolkien said after The Hobbit he wanted to try his hand at a really long tail. He was lucky in that the critical and financial success of The Hobbit created an audience who wanted more from him, at least his publisher wanted more. So the trilogy definitely needs to be read in order. The books are not standalone. You need to start at the beginning. The Fellowship of the Ring has critical details that you need to understand the later bits. Like, what is the ring? Why does anybody care about it? So you'll get that from the Fellowship. Some people are going to find the Fellowship is in need of an additional edit, which never happened. But I'm not going to tell you too much about that because it would be a spoiler, and also, if you don't notice that, then that's cool. The Two Towers is actually my favorite of the books in the trilogy because the story is now moving along at full steam, and so the narrative here is really good, and it has the Ents in it, which is probably my favorite bit in all of Tolkien. I mean, who doesn't like talking trees, okay? The Two Towers is my personal favorite. Then we get to Return of the King, which is good in itself. The ending is good, but it also has appendices with some really cool historical stuff from the Second Age, the earlier ages. And it has the story of Helm, it has the history of the dwarves, the backstory about Aragorn and his elvish wife, or elvish bride. Basically, all this historical details which make for a better story by providing that rich background of detail. The thing about Tolkien which makes Lord of the Rings good, I think, is actually this historical quality. That A, it is definitively in the past, and you know it's in the past, it's told as in the past. And B, that past has a rich level of detail. There are things which we will never know about it, and those are left to the imagination. So it's this combination of history and fantasy that really, I think Tolkien may have sort of invented that idea that makes Lord of the Rings worth reading, still worth reading. Now, we have to go here. Peter Jackson films. As with all film adaptations of books, you have to read the books first. You just have to, okay? If it's too late, and then you're in for a treat, because the books are so much better than the movies in one decisive way, and that is the plot, the story. I think Jackson did everything right in his movies in terms of bringing Middle-earth into focus and making that world come alive. But I don't know why he decided that the plot line in the books didn't work for him and needed to be changed. He felt he needed to alter the plot line. And that poses serious problems, because when you have a story which is intentionally a kind of history, then the plot can't be changed without producing what amounts to an alternative history or an alternative story. So I think that was a mistake on Peter Jackson's part. If you agree with me, I'd love if you put in the comments what you think about that. If it didn't matter, or maybe you didn't even notice. If you haven't read the books yet, you wouldn't know that he changed the plot. But like I say, you're in for a treat, because the books are better. On the other hand, the Jackson movies do materialize a lot of cool stuff, like the languages and all the weapons, and Viggo Mortensen really is the ideal actor to play Aragorn. He's fantastic. You couldn't find anybody better. So I don't want to sound too negative about that. Anyway, if you like this content, please subscribe to my channel.